Welcome back to Extreme Highlights audio novels, where evolution points are currency, near-death experiences are Tuesday, and one necromancer's journey from broke student to multimillionaire material trader reaches its most terrifying and profitable peak yet. I'm your host, and today we're tearing through chapters 85 through 98 of Evolving My Undead Legion in a Game-like World, where Michael finally battles the gargoyle that's been mocking him since chapter 22, only to discover that the real nightmare was waiting inside. Chapter 85, Heading Out. Evolving Prince didn't cause as much commotion as Lucky, but the increase in power was still significant. I was right, Michael mused. Being stronger before evolution results in a stronger form afterward. However, it seems that's all it is, a stronger self, not a more advanced evolution. Michael smiled as he examined the transformed prince. Gaining a deeper understanding of the rules surrounding his talents always brought him a sense of satisfaction. Undead Redthorn LV, 25, Max, continue reading at Empire. Name Prince. Exp 235,789 / 1,021,752. Rank Reyes. Skills Bite Plant Control Intermediate Mastery Poison Basic Mastery New. Master Michael Norman. Prince's skill set was less impressive than Lucky's, but it was only a matter of time before he caught up. Of course, compared to Lucky's rapid ascension, Prince's progress would take longer since Michael planned to focus on his other undead as well. As Michael glanced at the poison skill on Prince's panel, an odd expression flickered across his face. It all began with this evolution. During the first and second evolutions, Michael had assumed that the entire evolution route for forest wolves would revolve around nature. And while it still did to some extent, it wasn't in the way he had initially expected. The once nature-bound forest wolves had now turned into poison sacs, and judging by the direction of their evolution, it was only going to become more extreme. Though the irony was amusing, Michael didn't mind having such undead in his arsenal. The only real concern was ensuring he didn't accidentally succumb to their poison himself. Now that all the undead requiring evolution were taken care of, Michael took one last look at his talent before heading out. It was finally time to see what the ruin and the land of origin had to offer. Talent Infinite Evolution. Evolution points 15. Michael tried not to feel disheartened as his evolution points dropped from 3 digits to 2. However, thinking about how much strength these points had brought him, he couldn't help but feel that all his sacrifices so far were worth it. In the end, he could always regain the points he spent. The real issue was his own impatience. Michael retraced his steps to the exit of the abandoned building, where the gargoyle he had encountered a few days ago awaited. Prince stood at the ready in front of him. The sky was brightly lit now, making it the perfect time to battle a strong monster while keeping an eye on his unfamiliar surroundings. For an inexperienced explorer like Michael, it was far better to venture out during the day than at night. As for why he was already thinking about exploring when he hadn't even dealt with the gargoyle yet, Michael considered his victory a given. He didn't believe Prince would struggle to handle the gargoyle in a one-on-one fight under normal circumstances. Not only was there a 4-level difference between them, but their ranks were also the same. There was no scenario where the gargoyle could punch above its level, even if its species was high-ranked among 3-star rare monsters. The only real annoyance might be breaking through its stony body. It did look extremely sturdy. After some time walking through the corridors, Michael finally came face to face with the monster that had hindered his progress in the land of origin for days. Well, not exactly face to face. It had its back turned to him, standing eerily still like a statue. If Michael didn't have detect, even he might have been deceived. Gargoyle LV 20. Rank rare. An old gargle, weakened after years of neglect. Oh, it's even dropped a level, Michael thought, surprised. He recalled the words of a senior on the forum, who had mentioned that it took an incredibly long time for artificial creatures like gargles to degrade. According to the post, such creatures wouldn't even lose a level after 50 years. Based on this, and how Michael had described the abandoned dorm, the senior had estimated this ruin to be at least 200 years old. That was plenty of time for valuable things to be destroyed. However, with his growing understanding of ruins from the forum, Michael knew one thing: the older the ruin, the more extraordinary any treasure within it would be if it was still intact and usable. Of course, finding something was another matter entirely, but if he did, it would be an absolute treasure. The thought of exploration and treasure hunting filled Michael with anticipation. He mentally commanded Prince to advance while stepping back and summoning his rank 1 undead, a verdant wolf, to guard him. Once ready, Michael gave the command to attack. Prince vanished in an instant. Despite moving faster than he had in the level 2 dimension crack at the ape region, there was no violent gust of wind accompanying his speed. This oddity barely registered with Michael, as his attention was quickly diverted. The moment Prince disappeared, a loud sound echoed, the clash of two heavy objects colliding, followed by another crash. Something had slammed into the ground. Michael quickly activated share senses on Prince to grasp what was happening. He had no chance of keeping up with a battle fought at such terrifying speeds with his own eyes. Luckily, Prince was within 100 meters, so the skill worked perfectly. Michael's vision shifted to the familiar black and white world of share senses. He saw that Prince standing a few meters away from the gargle, which had been sent crashing into the ground and created a shallow pit. Strangely, Prince didn't approach the downed creature. Michael didn't need to ask why. A short distance beyond the fallen gargle stood a tall, tower-like structure. But what made Michael's heart race wasn't the tower itself, it was the two massive statues guarding the entrance. Each statue stood about 4 meters tall and bore an uncanny resemblance to the gargle in the pit, with one glaring difference: they had wings. And those wings were spreading. Chapter 86 Battle. Through Prince's vision, Michael didn't need to activate Detect to recognize the danger in front of him. The two massive gargles looked like the bigger, stronger siblings of the one Prince had just ambushed. It was safe to assume they were much more powerful than the one that had just shrugged off Prince's attack. Michael's instincts kicked in immediately. Stretching out his hand, he activated Undead Summoning to call forth his strongest undead, Lucky. The area near the exit of the abandoned dormitory was spacious, so there was no risk of Lucky being cramped upon summoning. A towering, hulking figure appeared, immediately scanning the surroundings. Though Lucky didn't know what he was up against, he could sense his master's urgency through their bond and prepared to act. "Lucky, go help Prince," Michael commanded sharply. Lucky didn't hesitate. With a burst of speed, he barreled toward the exit. The entrance itself was too narrow for his massive frame, so he tore through it, demolishing the structure as his bulk forced its way outside. Michael maintained share sensors with Prince, observing the situation through his eyes. The two gargles had already taken to the skis, hovering about 7 meters above the ground. Their flapping wings created powerful gusts of wind that swirled violently. Michael didn't bother questioning how creatures made of stone could fly. This was a magical world where anything was possible. Prince, on the other hand, wasn't concerned at all. It wasn't out of indifference. His limited intelligence simply didn't allow for such thoughts. All Prince knew was that his master had ordered him to kill the smaller gargle, and now these two larger ones were interfering. That made them enemies. With a loud howl, Prince activated plant control. Thick, powerful vines erupted from the ground, growing rapidly and surging toward the two airborne gargoyles. As for the original gargoyle his master had ordered him to kill, Prince had momentarily shifted focus. Your journey continues at Empire. It wasn't that he had forgotten, but his limited intelligence only allowed him to focus on one task at a time. To Prince, the two new, stronger enemies were the immediate threat. His goal was clear: destroy them first, then deal with the original target afterward. Just because Prince didn't know how to handle the situation and was acting on his limited intelligence didn't mean there wasn't someone who could do it for him. The moment Michael sent Lucky out, he immediately took control of Prince's actions. Though he didn't know exactly how powerful the two gargoyles were, the pressure radiating from them was undeniable. Even from where he stood, Michael could sense they were leagues above Prince. Something within the gargoyles seemed to be awakening. Even in Prince's black and white vision, the colors around them darkened ominously. Not wanting to lose his undead after so much investment, Michael acted quickly. Just as Prince summoned vines from the ground, the area erupted with thicker, larger vines that grew even faster. They shot toward the air, aiming to entangle their targets. Lucky had arrived. Prince's movements came to a halt mid-action as Michael asserted full control. The vines paused in the air for a brief moment before adjusting their trajectory. Everything was happening so fast, yet Michael felt his brain working overtime to keep up. While his eyes couldn't track the rapid movements of the monsters and his undead, his enhanced intelligence allowed his mind to calculate and adapt in real time. For the first time since his awakening, Michael felt like he was truly fighting as a necromancer, leveraging the speed and processing power that came with his improved intelligence stat. He issued two quick orders, one for Lucky to deal with the two flying gargoyles in the air, and another for Prince to finish off the injured level 20 gargoyle before it could recover and complicate the battle. The undead sprang into action immediately. Prince's vines, which had initially targeted the air, redirected toward the grounded gargoyle. The creature's body was covered in cracks, but Michael noticed through Prince's vision that they were slowly mending. Is it regenerating? What kind of monster is this? Is that even stone? While Prince charged toward his designated target, Michael shifted his focus to Lucky. With his current mastery of the share senses skill, he could only link his vision to two undead at a time, but in this scenario, it was enough. Lucky's mastery of his abilities was far superior to Prince's. His vines were not only faster, but also thicker, longer, and more durable. They moved like a living forest, chasing the two airborne gargoyles as they darted through the sky at incredible speed. Despite Lucky's overwhelming power, the flying gargoyles skillfully avoided the writhing mass of vines, weaving through the air like predators teasing their prey. The once clear sky was now filled with an intricate web of Lucky's vines, twisting and turning under his control. Michael was in awe. This was the true power of a creature that could contend with a rank 2 beast. The display was breathtaking, and for the first time, Michael fully understood the power of his undead. If a being like Lucky ever appeared on Earth, it would be no exaggeration to call it a god. For a while, the gargoyles did nothing but circle in the air, skillfully staying out of Lucky's range. However, through Lucky's eyes, Michael noticed the colors around the creatures darkening further. He didn't know what it signified, but it didn't feel like good news. Fortunately, Prince had managed to finish off the level 20 gargoyle. Michael quickly ordered him to move closer to Lucky and assist in any way possible. There was no time to check whatever notification panel had popped up or savor the satisfaction of overcoming a major obstacle. Just as Michael was starting to believe the airborne gargoyles wouldn't make an immediate move, they acted. In an instant, several magic circles of varying sizes appeared in the sky around the two gargles. The sight sent a shiver down Michael's spine. He didn't know what the circles were for, but he didn't need Lucky's enhanced senses to understand they weren't good news. Even from within the dorm, the overwhelming mana emanating from the magic circles was palpable. Is this why they didn't retaliate earlier? Michael clenched his fists, uncertainty gripping his mind. These creatures, seemingly made of stone, weren't mindless. They could think, strategize, and now, apparently, wield magic. He had no idea what concept governed their existence, but it was far beyond what he had anticipated. Acting quickly, Michael used his connection with the verdant wolf beside him, commanding it to create a dome of thick vines around them for protection. At the same time, he sent a mental order to his other undead within the building to brace themselves. Even though the magic circles were clearly aimed at Lucky and Prince, there was no guarantee they wouldn't be caught in the crossfire. The moment Michael issued his command, the purpose of the magic circles became clear. Stone spears materialized within the circles, and without warning, shot toward Lucky and Prince at incredible speeds. Fortunately, Michael had already commanded Lucky to protect them, and a dome of thick vines surrounded the two undead. However, the spears came in overwhelming quantities to strike the dome from all angles, slowly chipping away at it. But it would take more than this to bring Lucky down. As sections of the dome weakened or broke apart, Lucky immediately replaced them with more vines, maintaining the barrier. For a while, this exchange repeated, stone spears breaking through, only for new vines to grow in their place. Inside the dome, Michael was surrounded by darkness, unable to see what was happening outside. The vibrations and tremors, however, were unmistakable. Just as he had suspected, his side had indeed been caught in the crossfire. The vibrations weren't just from the ongoing attacks, but from the abandoned building collapsing around them. At least for now, they were safe. Neither Lucky nor Prince appeared to be in immediate danger. Then the vibrations stopped. Before issuing any further commands, Michael activated another one of his skills. Bone armor. Immediately, skeletal bone structures began forming around his body, wrapping him in a protective shell. The armor wasn't comprehensive, covering only key areas such as his head, chest, arms, and legs, but the sturdy bone plating gave him some reassurance. Satisfied with his protection, Michael turned his attention back to Lucky. "Clear the dome and remove the debris," he ordered. The verdant wolf responded immediately, vines pulling away to reveal the aftermath of the attack. Dust and rubble shifted and fell as the dome opened, the debris on top of it pushed aside. Michael reconnected his vision with Lucky, ready to assess the situation and give the next set of commands. Name: Michael Norman. Class: Adept Necromancer. Level 15. Exp 017718. Strength 30.42. Agility 41.16. Constitution 31.72. Intelligence 110.1. Attribute points 30. Skills: Undead Summoning, Undead Revival, Detect, Basic Shot, Share Senses, Spearmanship, Acid Shot, Bone Spear, Slow Curse, Bone Armor, Corpse Explosion. Talent: Infinite Evolution. Class Skill: Contract Slot 2040. Gift: Mark of Origin. Chapter 87, The Plan. Though it was not the appropriate situation to be feeling happy, Michael was grateful he had not decided to take action when Lucky had become a 3-star rare rank undead and was at level 18. The Lucky of then would have had a tough battle against the level 20 gargle, but there was still a chance to win. After years of neglect, the gargle's prowess should be weaker than what its level even suggested. However, had Michael been impulsive back then because of his newly upgraded strength and went after the gargle, just to awaken these two strong gargles that were surprisingly very close by, he would have tasted his first death on the land of origin. Thankfully, he had waited long enough to significantly grow to a stage where he could contend with them. However, the current situation still wasn't looking good. A good monster was always one that was dead. With the dome released, Michael was now exposed to the scene outside. Lucky and Prince were still hidden with the vine dome Lucky had made, but seeing as several vines still sharply tried to get the gargoyle in the air when they attempted getting closer, it showed Lucky didn't need its eye to attack. Stay updated through Empire. Its vines could act as eyes for it. Though the sun was shining bright, the atmosphere around Michael was dim due to Lucky's vines that covered the sky. The sight immediately brought a thought to Michael. It strangely seemed like a domain. To be honest, Lucky wasn't fully going all out since it didn't use its poison abilities. From Lucky's race name alone, it was obvious what its strong point was. However, Michael didn't have Lucky activate anything poison-related. For one, he was close by, and wasn't stupid to think that being Lucky's master made him immune to the poison it had. Two, the gargoyles were not flesh and blood monsters. Michael figured using such a skill was purely a waste of time. Also, those two had to be closer to Lucky for the skill to work, but it was obvious they weren't going to throw their advantage away. For a moment, both sides were in a stalemate. Michael thought hard about how to go about the situation when something caught his eyes. A tower. The tower those two gargoyles had been initially guarding caught Michael's attention. The sight was quite impressive. It was huge and pitch black and reached an impressive height of 10 meters. It also seemed suspiciously sturdy for a building that should have been abandoned for centuries. Michael also noticed that the area around the building didn't seem to have been spared from Lucky's rampage with plant control. Michael was just about to take it as a coincidence when he found out that somehow it also seemed to be the only area around Lucky that didn't get bombarded with the stone spears from earlier. Michael noticed this and inspected a bit more. It's deliberate, Michael could see it clearly. They're protecting the tower, Michael figured. Their initial location had been guarding the entrance of the tower, so if it was a creature whose purpose was to guard the tower, it would make sense they wouldn't try to destroy it themselves. Them leaving the area of the tower might have much to do with not wanting to get caught in vines. The behavior brought an idea to Michael, and he mentally sent a command to Lucky. A moment later, Lucky suddenly released the dome around it and also withdrew the vines that scattered around in the sky, letting the sun above finally shine its grace better on the surroundings. However, the gargoyle didn't come closer on top of all this and continued flying in the sky. Michael had already expected this, so it wasn't surprising. I want to see if you'd still stay up there, Michael thought to himself. Of course, Lucky only withdrew his vines a little back to the ground and did not cover the sky like it did before. It didn't mean it dismissed the skill. While mentally commanding the undead verdant wolf beside him to guard him, Michael gave his command to his undead to act. If protecting the tower was their purpose, then Michael did not believe the gargoyles would watch as it got destroyed. But since he was trying to bait them into coming down, he had to make his intention to attack the tower very obvious rather than actually destroying it and turning these monsters berserk if they had that mode. The tower was a restriction on that part, and Michael figured that even if he couldn't defeat these monsters, he should have no problem leaving since the gargoyle won't follow him too far if guarding the tower was their purpose and first priority. Suddenly, Prince, who had been inactive for a while, activated his skill and spread out thick, long vines that hurtled towards the tower. It looked fast, but in the midst was unnecessary movement, or rather fancy ones that actually slowed the speed. However, this was enough. And as planned, just as Michael had guessed, the gargoyles were meant to defend the tower. The moment they saw Prince's target, they charged forward at him immediately in a blink. As this was something Michael had already anticipated, he had already given an order to Lucky, who had his vines spread out, that the moment the gargle came within range, he should use his vines to create a dome cage, trapping them all in it and battling it out. Of course, Michael wasn't going to throw away the lives, well, his undead, just for a chance to kill the gargle if the possibility wasn't big. And such possibility also had to be with his undead coming out safe and complete. If the plan succeeds and Lucky can trap them, Michael would connect their vision with his and plan based on the moment. Just as Lucky and Prince were making moves, Michael was also having the other, undead in the bottom, more ruined building move too. Chapter 88 Battle Over. Michael once again felt the inconvenience of not having all of his undead inside the netherworld, where he could summon and dismiss them at will. Right now, if he didn't want to accidentally lose one of them in the crossfire between Lucky, Prince, and the two flying gargles, it would be better if they weren't even outside in the first place. Even he wasn't safe outside, but he had no choice but to take everything head-on. Fortunately, the gargles' sights were never on him. However, this didn't mean that just because they didn't have their sight on him, they couldn't kill him. After all, those stone spears earlier seemed like magical rockets with the destruction they laid down. If one was to accidentally touch him, he knew he'd die. At that point, the only undead he'd be able to use were the ones he had in the netherworld, since he could just tug at their connection with the netherworld to summon them back to him, even if they were far away in another world. The mana would be something scary, though. However, for the ones he couldn't summon into the netherworld before and died while reviving in another part of the land of origin, it was best to forget about them. The land of origin was very vast. Michael had seen a post on the forum once from someone who shared his experience of being best friends with another awakener in the real world. Despite this, they didn't meet again in the land of origin until they both advanced to rank 3, 10 years later. For all Michael knew, if he died now, he could be 7 big continents distant away from here. If they were any ordinary undead, Michael wouldn't care much, but his undead just happened to be special. Regardless of whether his talent could always make more, just like how a rich man could make $10,000 a day didn't mean he'd feel normal throwing $5,000 away. Okay, maybe it was that Michael was selfish as he was greedy. But it certainly wouldn't feel great to die, and on top of that, lose access to his undead and be forced to break the soul contract he shared with them, while taking a backlash multiple times due to this as well. There was also the part that his daily points would reduce, and 10% of his stats, the current Michael was extremely unwilling to lose. All in all, he wasn't trying to die in this fight but win it, and if he couldn't, come back another day when he's stronger, which wouldn't take long. All these thoughts flashed through Michael's mind. Using the share senses skill, he saw what was happening in the dome in front of him through the eyes of Lucky and Prince. In the vine dome, the two gargles had little place to fly. Around them were numerous vines trying to entangle them. Also, the dome seemed to be getting smaller, further cornering them. They also tried to cast spells in haste, getting hit every single time they were interrupted by vines. Even if they successfully cast a skill, it did little damage to the vines in a place where there were more than enough. All this was Lucky acting against the gargle, with Prince occasionally harassing at the side. From what Michael could see, it seemed that if one could reduce the gargle's advantage of flight, they weren't so scary anymore. Of course, this was only possible because they held a weakness against the gargle. If the gargles had nothing to be concerned about except for attacking, Michael could foresee a long, drawn-out, difficult battle. Fortunately, it seemed things were finally going to his advantage. Moments passed like this, and the vine dome grew smaller and smaller until finally, Lucky was able to entangle the two gargles. They struggled hard, but was Michael going to let them go after so much effort? Tear them to pieces, Michael ordered in a cold tone, and Lucky obeyed without hesitation. Surrounded by vines, Lucky pulled and pulled until finally, like stones, the gargles were separated into pieces. Your undead, Lucky, has killed a level 25, level 39 winged gargle and gained 3654 exp. Stay tuned with Empire. You've received feedback from your undead, Lucky, and gained 448 exp. Your undead, Lucky, has killed a level 25, level 37 winged gargle and gained 3547 exp. You've received feedback from your undead, Lucky, and gained 389 exp. Michael then went down to a notification he had ignored before. Your undead, Prince, has killed a level 20, level 27 gargle and gained 2888 exp. You've received feedback from your undead, Prince, and gained 257 exp. Knowing that experience points would only ever come from the dead, Michael's troubled heart was finally at ease. Mentally commanding Lucky to remove the dome, he turned to check both his and his undead's progress. Venomthorn Ravager LV, 25 max. Name Lucky. Exp 805,990/1,021,752. Rank Extraordinary. Skills Bite Plant Control, Advanced Mastery, Poison Advanced Mastery, Viral Growth Basic Mastery, Toxic Resurgence Basic Mastery. Master Michael Norman. Undead Redthorn LV, 25 max. Name Prince. Exp 238,677/1,021,752. Rank Rare. Skills Bite Plant Control, Intermediate Mastery, Poison Basic Mastery. Master Michael Norman. The experience points gained from killing the gargles were not insignificant. It brought Lucky and Prince closer to rank 2, especially the former. Right now, Lucky only needed about 200,000 more experience points to advance. Basically, about 100 more gargles and Lucky would be able to advance, Michael thought, shaking his head. Though it seemed difficult, at least Lucky was closer to ranking up than he was. Status. Name Michael Norman. Class Adept Necromancer. Level 15. Exp 1094, 17718. Strength 30.42. Agility 41.16. Constitution 31.72. Intelligence 110.1. Attribute points 30. Skills Undead Summoning, Undead Revival, Detect, Basic Shot, Share Senses, Spearmanship, Acid Shot, Bone Spear, Slow Curse, Bone Armor, Corpse Explosion. Talent Infinite Evolution. Class Skill Contract Slot 2040. Gift Mark of Origin. Chapter 89 Looting and Loots. Looking at how his experience points to level up had almost filled by 1/10, Michael deduced that just as Lucky would require about 100 gargles to advance, he himself would likely level up alongside his undead's advancement based on the experience points feedback alone. Dismissing the panels in front of him, Michael hopped onto the back of the undead verdant wolf at his side and mentally commanded it to head toward Lucky's position, not sparing a single thought for how the undead beneath him might feel. Unnamed undead ==. As Michael made his way toward Lucky and Prince's position near the remains of the gargle, rather than summoning them to come to him, he took the opportunity to observe his surroundings. With the undead having withdrawn their vines, his view of the land of origin was no longer obstructed. What greeted him was a desolate expanse of ruins, much of it newly devastated by his undead skills and the gargle's barrage of stone spears. Behind him lay the remnants of a wide building, something he had taken note of after spending so much time in the abandoned dormitory. However, as he scanned the area further, it became clear that only two structures still bore any semblance of their former glory. The now ruined dormitory behind him and the shiny black tower looming ahead. Every other building had long since collapsed, with their remains further reduced to rubble by the rampage of the undead wolves and the gargoyles. The ruins appeared to be situated within a forest, as beyond its crumbling premises lay a wide expanse of dense greenery. While Michael was curious about whether civilization lay beyond the forest, exploring it was far from his current priority. If he was going to investigate anything, it would be these ruins. You all should spread out and bring me anything that's not stone or sand. Don't break anything, and you there, gather the remains of those gargoyles, Michael commanded the 7 undead standing behind him. For the task of collecting the gargoyle remains, he assigned it to the humanoid undead with functional hands. He didn't trust Lucky or Prince with such a task. The ruins themselves seemed largely devoid of anything noteworthy, except for the shiny black tower in the distance. Even then, there was no guarantee that it would yield any rewards. The remains of the gargoyles, however, were a different matter entirely. Despite their stone-like appearance, Michael suspected their bodies contained special materials. Given the gargoyles' rank and strength, he was convinced their remains might be worth a significant amount. Michael had no concrete understanding of the power level of a rank 3 creature, but he estimated the gargoyles his undead had defeated were at least on par with that level of cultivation. His commands were also deliberately simple to avoid confusion. If he had told the undead to bring back anything valuable, it would have depended entirely on their limited understanding of value. One might think a random stone was precious and present it proudly. Still, Michael didn't harbor much hope. The ruins looked desolate, and even if there were valuable items hidden within, his basic undead would likely overlook them. In the end, this was just the first round of screening. If nothing else, it served the secondary purpose of cleaning up the space and making the search later easier. It wasn't until the remains of all the gargoyles were brought together and placed in front of Michael that he used detect on them. Gargoyle LV 20. Rank Rare. This was the one that had blocked his entrance for days. Finally, after the battle, Michael felt the satisfaction of overcoming such an obstacle. It would have been easier had it not been for the 2 additional gargoyles, but fortunately, everything had ended well. Next, Michael checked the 2 other gargoyles he was curious about. Winged Gargoyle LV 25. Rank Rare. Winged Gargoyle LV 25. Rank Rare. Just 3-star rare creatures, Michael muttered, a bit surprised. He had suspected that having wings might imply a higher rank, possibly the same as Lucky's, but that wasn't the case. In fact, they were at the same level as the wingless gargoyle. Michael wasn't shocked by the revelation, though. He already knew that even within the same rank, there could be variations. A normal slime was a 1-star common rank, just like a goblin, but the goblin is generally more versatile in many aspects. If they were extraordinary ranked creatures, even if Lucky's race happened to be ranked higher, it would have been a 2vs1 fight with a very high chance of losing, Michael mused. Fortunately, that wasn't the case. Unfortunately, the gargoyles dropped no loot like spirit crystals or anything. Is it because they were artificially made? Michael wondered, uncertain, but feeling that might be the reason. Regardless, it wasn't like he hadn't gained something of value from the gargoyles. After dismantling the bodies and using detect on each part individually, Michael discovered the following loot. Find more chapters on Empire. Obsidian Forge Al. A blend of dark metals and obsidian-like minerals, offering a stone-like texture combined with flexibility and high durability. Commonly used for constructing durable constructs or golems. Veined Shard. A lightweight yet durable fragment with blue-green veins, often used to craft mana-conductive tools. Feather plate. Flexible, metallic plates as light as feathers, ideal for creating aerodynamic constructs. Kora stone. Dense, black material, prized for its ability to store and stabilize mana. Crystal sphere. A smooth, patterned stone utilized in crafting energy detectors and amplifiers. Ether stone. A pale, translucent stone with anti-gravitational properties, frequently used in levitation devices. Runed core. An irregular core marked by glowing runes, functioning as a power source for advanced machinery. Somehow, reading the description of everything felt like looking at a technological invention. Seems like the gargle is referred to as a golem. This made Michael recall Myra and her class, Alchemist. With his knowledge of fantasy from Earth, this felt like a magical scientist version, but he could be wrong. However, if he was right, Michael briefly wondered if Myra could one day create something like this. If she can, then Alchemist is probably a strong, rare class, assuming it's even a rare class. Chapter 90, A Sudden Idea. Looking at the nature of his loot, Michael wore a thoughtful expression. His gaze shifted to the towering black structure in the distance. Was this place some sort of research site in the past? The intricate design and functionality of the gargle's internal mechanisms amazed him. Even after years of abandonment, it still functioned, albeit at a diminished rank. This alone was a testament to the skill and ingenuity of its creators. However, the strength of the gargle also gave him pause. The ruins had clearly been abandoned for many years, yet the signs of decay were natural, not the aftermath of a violent conflict. So, where did all the people who once lived here go? Michael frowned, considering the possibilities. Did they evacuate, taking everything valuable with them? However, what could make people with such resources evacuate? Michael wasn't the best at analyzing such things, and after some fruitless speculation, he gave up. Whatever happened here is long in the past. The place is abandoned now, but I should still be cautious. Who knows what kind of inventions might still remain? Michael's expectations weren't high. This wasn't a place destroyed suddenly, but one that seemed systematically evacuated. Anything of real value would have been taken long ago, and whatever wasn't would have likely deteriorated into dust by now. Still, he clung to the hope of finding something worthwhile to sell and make some money. Unbeknownst to Michael, his sense of value was slowly being warped. Compared to the evolution points his talent provided, everything else seemed trivial. Where others might feel disappointed at the likely lack of treasure, Michael simply shrugged and continued with the flow, focusing on potential sales. Read new chapters at Empire. With such a skewed mindset, only time would tell what Michael might consider valuable. Michael stopped dwelling on the possible history of the ruins and stored all the remains of the gargles in his storage space. It's a pity they're non-flesh monsters, so I can't use undead revival on them, he muttered. The thought frustrated him. After witnessing the gargle's prowess and flight capabilities, his wish to add a flying undead to his arsenal increased. Unfortunately, it seemed that wish would not be easily fulfilled. If only I could evolve normal animals like eagles. Michael abruptly paused, his expression shifting as he clenched his teeth. Did I seriously only think of this now? As long as it was a living creature with flesh, it could be turned into an undead. Eagles, or even something as mundane as fish, fit the criteria perfectly. The thought struck him as both simple and ingenious. Most necromancers wouldn't bother with ordinary animals, seeing it as a waste of a valuable contract slot. But Michael, with his unique ability to acquire high-rank undead without much difficulty, could afford to think differently. An ordinary animal is probably, at best, a one-star common-rank creature, but after becoming an undead, Surely I could use my evolution points on it, right? The moment the idea took hold, Michael couldn't shake it. His mind spun with possibilities. Ants, bees, countless other creatures with fascinating traits. What would happen if he evolved them? The thought filled him with a newfound curiosity and excitement for experimentation. However, knowing he had tasks to focus on, Michael forced himself to calm down. Once he settled his thoughts, Michael shifted his gaze toward the Black Tower. Taking a deep breath, he mentally commanded Lucky and Prince to follow him, positioning them in front as he approached the entrance of the imposing structure. The entrance was a black, metal double door that appeared heavy and formidable at first glance, but Michael wasn't particularly concerned. Whether metal or stone, enough brute force would bring it down eventually. Scanning his surroundings briefly, he called over one of the orcs nearest to him, interrupting its search for items. "Break it down," Michael ordered, pointing directly at the doors. The orc, without hesitation, followed the command. It reeled back its fist and delivered a powerful punch to the door. Boom! A loud impact echoed, but the door remained undamaged. Instead, intricate magic circles glowed faintly on its surface, absorbing the force of the attack. "Magic circles, and they're still functional," Michael murmured, a mix of surprise and intrigue in his tone. Despite the apparent obstacle, Michael remained unfazed. "Continue, don't stop." The orc obeyed, hammering the door with relentless punches. Bangs, bangs, bang. The once quiet ruins, briefly tranquil after the battle with the gargles, were now alive with noise again. Michael observed silently as the orc's attacks persisted. Gradually, he noticed the light from the magic circles dimming with each strike. Not surprising, Michael thought. After so many years, they shouldn't be at their peak. It's only a matter of time. The orc, being undead with infinite stamina, can keep this up for days if necessary. The fact that the magic circles were still operational gave Michael hope. If the tower's defenses had lasted this long without maintenance, there was a good chance valuable treasures might still lie within. As the orc continued its relentless assault, Michael briefly considered scouting other parts of the ruins. However, he quickly dismissed the thought when he noticed faint mist seeping from the orc's body. The body of the orc also increased slightly, but it was visible. Curious, Michael tugged at his connection with the orc and realized it had become frustrated with its lack of progress. In its irritation, the orc had instinctively activated one of its skills. Bangs, bang. The strikes became harder, faster, and more forceful. The magic circle's light dimmed at a noticeably quicker pace. Momentarily shifting his focus from the door, Michael checked the details of the skill the orc had activated. It was one he hadn't checked before, despite all the time spent evolving his undead. Berserk Basic Mastery Proficiency, 0.7%. Berserk temporarily increases the user's physical strength and agility by 25% each, at the cost of reducing defense by 10% and significantly increasing aggression. Stamina is rapidly drained when skill is active. Chapter 91, Entering the Tower. The Berserk skill was powerful. Observing the heightened ferocity of the orc, Michael decided to join in the attack. At the moment, he had only one skill suitable for this situation, and it was from the same spell series as Bone Armor, the Bone Spear skill. Bone Spear, Intermediate Mastery, Proficiency, 15.2%. Bone Spear summons a sharp, ethereal spear made of bone to pierce through enemies. Travels up to 10 meters. This was the skill he had gained upon advancing to rank 1, starting at Intermediate Mastery, a level Michael could rely on even in combat. Bone Spear. Michael activated the skill, and 5 magic circles materialized behind him in midair. From these circles, white bone spears emerged, sharp and menacing. Without hesitation, Michael launched them at the metal door. Booms, bangs. The spears struck the door with immense force, complementing the orc's relentless punches. Michael observed the magic circles on the door's surface shake violently under the assault. Continue your saga on Empire. It's working, he noted, feeling a surge of motivation. Spurred by this progress, Michael channeled more mana and began to repeatedly fire bone spears at the door. While he considered involving Lucky and Prince, he refrained, concerned that their raw power might risk damaging anything valuable inside the tower. The tower structure itself was unusual. Aside from the entrance, the tower had no visible openings. Out of curiosity, Michael had used Detect on the walls. Blackstone, a highly durable material and an excellent conductor of mana, ideal for creating defensive tools. Even the walls were formidable, akin to a tortoise shell. The entire tower was designed like a fortress. For the same reason he didn't have Lucky or Prince attack the entrance, Michael refrained from targeting the walls. However, a thought lingered in his mind. If this building doesn't yield anything useful, I'll lay the whole thing bare just to collect some Blackstone. He didn't know if this material existed in abundance outside the land of origin, but its impressive properties suggested it would fetch a high price. That was all that mattered to him. Money. He was way too broke. A few minutes later, just as Michael's mana pool had been reduced to about half its total, the last remnants of energy in the magic circles on the metal door finally faded away. The orc, still under the effects of Berserk, a skill that consumed mostly stamina, which it has more than enough of as an undead, delivered another punch. This time, without the magic circles to absorb the impact, a massive dent appeared on the door. Michael's eyebrows raised slightly at the sight. Even the material used to make the door is special. I guess that's expected if it was capable of holding magic circles for years. He was genuinely delighted by the discovery. At this point, it felt like the entire tower itself might be the real reward of this ruin. With the magic circles destroyed, it only took a few more punches and a hard pull for the orc to completely dislodge the door, leaving the entrance wide open. As he stored the fragments of the black metal door in his storage space, Michael activated Detect to learn more about it. Void Steel, a rare, durable black metal that retains magical energy for extended periods. Resistant to physical damage and mana corrosion, it seamlessly integrates with enchantments. Yet another fancy material. The discoveries Michael had made so far only highlighted the grandeur of this ruin at its peak. Though he couldn't pinpoint the exact value of the materials he had gathered, their descriptions made it clear they were extremely valuable. He speculated their worth might rival that of spirit crystals. However, determining the rank was another matter. Spirit crystals from unranked creatures were classified as unranked, while those from rank 1 monsters held significantly more energy, earning them the rank 1 designation. A single rank 1 spirit crystal was priced at $100,000 in the Supers Association store, 5 times the price of an unranked crystal. Michael doubted the materials he had looted from the gargoyles, along with what he intended to gather from this tower building itself, were worth any less. Still, to determine their true value, he would have to wait until he returned to the real world. In the end, Michael concluded that his current haul should be enough to finally provide for his family, clothes to cover themselves, armor for protection in battle, and weapons to fully utilize their strength. All of this would undoubtedly require a significant amount of money. The stronger I get, the more I earn, the poorer I feel, Michael muttered, feeling there were no truer words to describe his predicament. After finishing the task of storing the metal door in his storage space, Michael's eyes finally rested at the open entrance of the tower. Just beyond the entrance lay nothing but darkness. It made sense. There was no opening to let sunlight into the building. However, Michael wasn't discouraged. He had the perfect thing to light up the way. Undead summoning. A greenish-black magic circle appeared beside him, and from it emerged a female orc, an orc shaman, to be precise. This particular shaman wasn't Lily, as Michael had long decided to avoid summoning her bearing the same name as his cousin until she was dressed. It felt far too awkward. In hindsight, naming his first orc shaman Lily had been a mistake. It was better to use other undead in the meantime. That didn't mean Michael had gotten completely used to the sight of naked, undead bodies, but he had learned to look past it and endure the discomfort. The summoned orc shaman possessed the fire manipulation skill, much like Lily. Interestingly, not all orc shamans shared the same elemental affinity. Among Michael's 15 orcs, only 5 were female shamans. Of those, 2 had fire affinity, while the others wielded wind, water, and earth. Michael could foresee that, with more evolutions, it was likely he'd encounter some truly unique and rare elemental affinities among his orc shamans in the future. Chapter 92, Exploring the Tower. Light a fire, Michael commanded his undead orc shaman. She obeyed instantly, raising her hand to conjure a small ball of fire. The flames appeared harmless at first glance, but Michael's senses told him otherwise. He could feel the raw potential radiating from them. It was clear this was no ordinary fire. Shifting his focus back to the tower's entrance, Michael took a deep breath, activating his bone armor once more. The familiar sensation of skeletal plates forming over his body brought a sense of security. With the orc shaman at his side, Lucky taking point, and Prince guarding the rear, Michael dismissed the orc that had smashed open the door. He didn't know what to expect beyond the entrance, and didn't need an overwhelming number of undead complicating the situation if something did come up. If numbers became necessary, he could always rely on undead summoning to pull reinforcements from the netherworld. Still, Michael hoped that, if he did summon more, it would be to haul loot rather than fight for his life. The moment he stepped inside, a damp, icy cold enveloped him. With the shaman's fire casting flickering light around the space, the hall ahead came into view, a wide, empty expanse lined with open rooms. The air was thick with the scent of mildew. The flickering light of the orc shaman's fire illuminated the crumbling walls. Seems like only the outer walls are made with special materials, Michael noticed. He also felt it made sense. Regardless of the organization, there had to be a level of luxury they couldn't afford. "Stay alert," Michael muttered, his voice low but firm. Lucky, the towering undead wolf, growled softly in response. The open rooms lining the walls were eerily still. Michael approached the nearest one, gesturing for the shaman to illuminate the space. As the light spilled into the room, he saw broken furniture scattered across the floor, tables splintered into pieces, shelves overturned, and glass shards glinting like tiny stars. Unfortunately, though the space outside the room was wide enough for Lucky and Prince to turn around, as long as they didn't stand side by side, passing through the door was impossible. Prince could barely squeeze himself into the room, but it was impossible for Lucky with his towering physique. Michael had the 2 wolves stay outside, while entering the room cautiously with the orc shaman. The room was exactly as he had expected, disarrayed furniture, a few looking like they'd turned to dust with a touch, and glass scattered across the floor, but something was different this time. The destruction didn't have the frantic urgency of an evacuation. It was as if the room had just been left. Michael's senses were on high alert as he stepped deeper into the room, his eyes scanning every corner. As he moved further in, his gaze fell upon the walls, which were adorned with faded diagrams and blueprints. They detailed not only the structure of the gargoyles, but also machinery that seemed designed to enhance and augment them. Metal plates, wires, and strange runes, all fused together in bizarre patterns. Was this a gargle production factory or something? He muttered, looking at the designs. The orc shaman's fire flickered, casting dancing shadows across a rusted workbench that looked like it had not been in use for a very long time, but its placement seemed to tell a story. Tools were scattered around, metal parts half-finished, as though someone had been in the middle of crafting something when everything was abandoned. Among the debris, Michael spotted more sketches, this time showing partial figures, stone-like armored beings with jagged limbs and sharp features. Gargles. Enjoy new chapters from Empire. These aren't finished, Michael mused aloud. They were still building them. He stepped back and motioned for his undead to follow him. The deeper into the tower they went, the more the pieces of the puzzle seemed to fit together. This place was a factory, each room designed to craft different parts for gargles, each piece a component of some larger, terrifying machine. As they made their way through the first floor, the pattern was clear. Every room seemed dedicated to a different stage in the creation of the gargles. Michael could almost hear the clang of hammers and the hum of energy filling the air as the work had been in progress. There's no way this was just some research outpost, he muttered. This was a weapons factory, this entire place. It looks like it was meant for war. Michael couldn't help but wonder what location in the land of origin he had ended up in. Hopefully it's not some war-torn continent or something, Michael muttered under his breath. Unfortunately, location wasn't something that could be controlled unless they killed themselves to change locations, and even then, the location was still random. His thoughts were interrupted as they reached the staircase leading up to the second floor. The space was too narrow and could only accommodate Michael and the shaman. So far, they hadn't encountered any issues, but Michael still didn't feel completely safe until he was out of the tower. However, he had little choice in this situation. In the end, he dismissed Lucky and Prince into the netherworld while summoning 3 male orcs with undead summoning to guard him. After ascending the stairs to the second floor, the space finally opened up again, and Michael immediately summoned Lucky and Prince back, dismissing the orcs aside from the orc shaman. Only when Lucky and Prince were by his side again did Michael feel safer and more confident. He took a moment to observe his surroundings, and the sight before him took his breath away. While the first floor had been about creation, this level seemed focused on assembly. The room they entered was filled with large stone slabs, some cracked and others still intact. On these slabs lay gargle bodies, half-formed, with limbs missing, their stone surfaces glistening faintly under the shaman's fire. Each piece was incomplete. Some of the gargles had their heads, but others were missing limbs. They didn't complete them, Michael whispered, his voice tinged with realization. They were assembling, but something interrupted the process, or someone. Chapter 93, Close to Death. Michael felt a chill at the thought and couldn't help but glance nervously at his surroundings. However, just like before, it was silent. The only noises came from him and his undead companions. Something still doesn't make sense, Michael muttered. Looking at the dorm I came from, it's clear this ruin had plenty of residents in the past, so how could they leave such a valuable tower untouched? Unless... His voice trailed off, and a sinking feeling gripped him. Unless they never left. Michael's heart thudded heavily in his chest. Am I just scaring myself? Michael tried to push the thought away, but suddenly a sound broke the silence. At first it was faint, almost imperceptible, but it grew louder. Food, I smell food. The voice was unnerving, belonging to no specific gender or age, and distorted as though multiple people were speaking in unison. Each word was out of sync, creating a disjointed and eerie resonance. The unsettling impression of the voice sent shivers down Michael's spine, but before he could react, a sharp, excruciating pain tore through his head. Ugh! He screamed, clutching his head as the pain overwhelmed him. His undead immediately froze, their alert postures revealing their readiness to defend him. But Michael realized something. They couldn't hear anything. The voice continued, its words clawing at his sanity. "Seekum, seekum." With each repetition, the pain in Michael's head worsened. It felt like jagged knives slicing through his mind. His vision blurred, and his knees buckled as he fought to remain conscious. "If I pass out, something bad will happen, very bad." His instincts screamed that giving in wasn't an option. As if to confirm his fears, a familiar system panel flashed before his eyes, its usual blue glow replaced by an ominous, blood-red hue. Despite the pain, Michael managed to make out the messages. "Chosen One is in danger. Chosen One is in danger. Danger detected to be capable of causing real death. Danger detected to be capable of causing real death. Chosen mental fortitude isn't strong enough to resist influence. It is advised to commit suicide by your own hands. It is advised to commit suicide by your own hands." For the first time since his awakening, the system's panels showed something beyond their usual. An unmistakable warning of true death. Explore new worlds at Empire. Death. The word echoed in his mind, cold and final. Through his connection with his undead, Michael sensed their unease. Their confusion was evident. They gathered around him protectively. But no, this wasn't what they should be doing. Protecting him wasn't enough. He needed to escape. He needed to get out of here. Michael gritted his teeth, summoning every ounce of strength he had left. With his mind teetering on the edge of oblivion, Michael forced his lips to move. And with a trembling voice, he managed to utter a single word. "Kill." He wanted to say more, "Kill me," to free himself from the excruciating torment, but the last word refused to come out as his strength failed. His vision dimmed, and the pain threatened to pull him under completely. But fate seemed to intervene. The moment his voice faltered, Michael's blurry gaze caught movement from above. A jet-black tentacle snaked its way down rapidly from the third floor, its inky presence exuding malice. It moved with an otherworldly swiftness, and its target was clear. Him. But it had chosen the wrong moment. "Kill." Michael's voice dropped as the tentacle lunged closer. To his undead, the word was absolute, a command etched into their very cores. And with no further clarification, there was only one logical target. The tentacle. It had to be what their master meant. "Kill." The command echoed in their souls, resonating with a shaky, otherworldly vibration. It carried something not of theirs. Pain. Not their own pain, but their master's. Madness gripped them, not their own but his. And most disturbingly, the oppressive shadow of death filled them, one that was entirely foreign. It was a feeling that none of them could comprehend fully, but it overwhelmed their growing intelligence and rationality. They went berserk. Suddenly, a loud howl pierced the air, one so deep and soul-shaking it seemed to reverberate through the very essence of a person. The entire tower trembled violently, the ground cracking beneath their feet. Thick, twisted vines erupted from the second floor, lashing out like serpents toward the black tentacle. The two forces collided with a tremendous force, entangling in a fierce, unrelenting struggle. The tentacle was powerful, but it was only one. Lucky, on the other hand, had numerous. Thick vines spiraled around the tentacle, pulling with immense strength. A horrifying scream echoed from the second floor. A sound filled with raw pain, twisting in the air like a dying animal. "Kill, I'll kill you." The voices, sounded as deranged as ever, their tone split and discordant. Clearly, the tentacle felt the full force of the vines, its form writhing in agony. And it was this pain that triggered a sudden shift. Chosen is no longer under influence. Chosen is temporarily safe. Chosen is no longer under influence. Chosen is temporarily safe. Michael's mind cleared. The blinding pain that had consumed his mind faded away, leaving only a dull, throbbing headache. His thoughts were no longer clouded, but he knew this reprieve was fleeting. He didn't need the system panel to tell him. The danger wasn't over. Michael took a quick glance. Vagu. He witnessed something that chilled him to his core. Without hesitation, he barked a command to the orc shaman beside him. Stop that damn huge fireball above your head. We need to get out of here, now. With the order given, he swiftly leaped onto the back of the orc shaman, who had already started to cancel the fireball she'd intended to hurl at the tentacle. She was confused, but she obeyed her master's command. Strength surged through her legs as she bolted toward the stairs leading to the first floor, disappearing in an instant. A second later, they were outside the tower. Michael's heart raced as he screamed, "What are you stopping for?" Turning quickly, he issued a command to the other undead, all of them, except Lucky and Prince. "Drop whatever you're holding and follow me." Pointing to a direction in the dense forest beyond the ruins, Michael urged the orc shaman forward. The pair, along with the other undead, took off in a blur, racing into the safety of the woods. The moment they fled, thick vines erupted from the ground, surrounding the Black Tower in a frenzy. Michael didn't dare look back. But he couldn't forget what he had seen when he'd used his skill on the tentacle after regaining his senses. Corrupted. Rank extraordinary. Chapter 94, Escaped. Never treat the land of origin like a game. It was a phrase Michael had seen countless times on the forums. It was also a mantra he'd repeated to himself after nearly losing his life to an acid slime just a few days ago. Never treat the land of origin like a game. But only now was Michael beginning to grasp its true meaning. The land of origin, at the end of the day, wasn't just a game or a simulation. It was real as the world he had come from. "I almost died," Michael murmured, the words heavy on his lips. The thought still felt surreal. The reality of it lingered in his mind like a stubborn shadow, filling him with a deep, gnawing insecurity he had never felt before. Yet as much as that realization rattled him, Michael knew there were more immediate concerns to address. Undead summoning. Michael stretched out both his hands, and two greenish magic circles appeared before him. From them emerged his two most powerful undead, Lucky and Prince. However, both were in terrible condition. Lucky's left eye had been blinded, and dark green, corrosive blood dripped to the ground, eating away at the soil. Its entire body was covered in deep scars, each leaking the same blood. Prince, though in better shape, had lost its tail and bore several less severe wounds. It was clear that Lucky had taken the brunt of the battle. Thankfully, neither had perished, but they were in no condition to be used effectively in combat until they healed. Unfortunately, this presented a significant problem. Unlike living creatures, undead didn't heal naturally, even if they retained certain traits from their past lives. Some undead could heal, but only to a limited extent. For example, Lucky and Prince's bleeding would eventually stop, but that was as far as natural recovery due to still having flesh would take them. If they were skeletal undead, healing that type would be more complicated. Certain types of undead could also consume flesh to convert it into energy for regeneration. There were also Necromancer spells specifically designed to aid in their recovery. But for now, the only option Michael had to help his injured undead was to provide them with fresh flesh to consume. Michael felt a pang of guilt for leaving Lucky and Prince behind to stall for time. But it had been a choice of survival. Either he escaped, or all of them would perish. At least by retreating, he could summon them back before it was too late. As for them defeating that creature, it was impossible. The creature was a 3-star extraordinary rank, 2 stars above lucky, and an entire major rank above prince. It was also at least 20 levels beyond Michael, evident from his inability to glean substantial information about it. Such a being could obliterate them all in a single strike. Michael suspected the only reason they were still alive was because the creature appeared weakened, likely having just awakened. From its behavior, directly targeting him and calling him food, Michael realized that had he been caught, he'd have been used as a supplement for its recovery. It wouldn't have been a simple matter of nourishment either. Based on the panel reaction, his death would have been certain. As for why it ignored his undead, the answer was probably simple. The only part of an undead that could be considered alive was their souls, and even those were abstract. "I think I'm starting to piece this together," Michael muttered. The ruins' eerie silence, coupled with the complete absence of people, made him suspect that the creature was responsible for the devastation. The tower, with its intricate design and focus on advanced weapon research and creation, suggested that its former inhabitants were likely the ones who created the monster. Recalling the creature's chilling, multi-layered voice, Michael felt his suspicions solidify. The extravagance of the tower, its advanced constructs like the gargoyles made from precious materials, all pointed to the immense capabilities of its creators. But perhaps they had overreached, creating something far beyond their control. It seemed they had paid the ultimate price. "It's still not safe here. We need to move," Michael said firmly. Though his body ached from the creature's mental assault and the strain of using a massive amount of mana to summon Lucky and Prince over such a great distance, he couldn't let himself rest. Michael wanted to put as much distance as possible between himself and the ruins, even though he had already fled a significant way. Every instinct told him he needed to keep going. Michael dismissed Lucky and Prince back to the netherworld, their battered forms vanishing into greenish smoke. In their place, he summoned the verdant wolf he had dismissed before entering the tower. Climbing onto its back, he signaled his remaining undead to follow, and together they continued their journey through the dense woods. As their figures flashed through the trees in a blur, Michael's mind burned with a mix of fury and determination. His lips pressed into a thin line as he swore silently, "Find your next read on Empire. Sooner or later, just you wait, I'll kill you." After running for a while, the tall, oppressive trees began to thin, gradually giving way to open grasslands. When Michael finally emerged from the forest, he spotted something in the distance that brought a small smile to his face. A massive wall standing proud a few hundred meters away, with people passing through its gates. Civilization, finally. However, Michael didn't rush toward the wall. He hesitated, glancing at himself and his undead. They were far from presentable. His clothes were tattered, his body showed signs of exhaustion, and his undead companions looked anything but welcoming. Even if he were alone, he wouldn't dare approach the gates in such a state. With a contemplative frown, he turned back toward the forest. "It's not the right time to head there. I need to prepare first. Besides, it's probably past noon in the real world by now. I should return and check on things." As Michael and his undead retreated into the cover of the trees, his thoughts drifted to the materials stored in his spatial storage. Chapter 95, back at the Supers Association. In the end, the only thing Michael had been able to take from the ruin was the remains of the gargoyles he had killed. While it wasn't a small amount, compared to the materials he had seen before the appearance of that thing, it felt painfully inadequate. Michael knew the materials in his possession were likely worth a fortune, possibly rivaling his highest earnings yet, but the more, the merrier, right? Despite the missed opportunities, he was just grateful to be alive. Part of the reason he had managed to react under the creature's mental influence was his vigilance. If he had let greed cloud his judgment, he might have died before Lucky and Prince could even respond. The system messages had been clear. Staying under the creature's influence would have killed him. The tentacle was only a topping. "I can only hope that thing doesn't leave its location," Michael muttered, a gnawing sense of guilt creeping into his thoughts. It felt as though he had unleashed some kind of abomination that could soon bring destruction. The very idea weighed heavily on his conscience. "The ruins situation can't be left unchecked for too long," he reasoned. "That monster shouldn't be rank 3, otherwise I'd have died instantly. It's probably still rank 2, which aligns perfectly with my current goals." The thought gave Michael a new sense of urgency. He needed to grow stronger and fast. That resolve, however, wasn't entirely selfless. Michael still had his eyes on the tower itself and its content. Now that his panic had subsided, the treasures within the tower had once again captured his imagination. After wandering through the forest for some time, Michael came across a secluded area with a cave that appeared untouched for years. Deciding it was a good spot for a temporary base, he settled there for the time being. Feeling uneasy about leaving Lucky and Prince in the netherworld given their injuries, and perhaps succumbing to paranoia, Michael decided to keep them with his body. Lucky, too large to rest inside the cave, stayed outside with the other undead that couldn't enter the netherworld. As for whether he'd need them in the real world, Michael decided to take a calculated risk. In any case, he was about to receive another 20 evolution points, which, combined with his current 15, would be more than enough to create another level 18 undead at 3-star rare rank. Leaving behind the corpses he had originally planned to sell for Lucky and Prince to consume, Michael returned his consciousness to his original body. A moment later, Michael opened his eyes to the slightly familiar ceiling of his hotel room. He didn't get up immediately and instead continued lying on the bed. "I should visit home soon. I miss Aunt Mia," he muttered. "Lily too." The words slipped out before he even realized it. On the surface, he seemed fine, but his mind was still shaken by his near-death experience. In that moment of fear, the faces of the two people closest to him had surfaced in his thoughts. Much of his current composure, which allowed him to stay put instead of rushing to be with them, was because most of those feelings stemmed from the original owner of this body rather than the transmigrator, Michael. Though the two were now one entity, their integration was more of a harmonized balance than perfect unity. Slowly but surely, however, Michael was becoming whole. After a while, he finally sat up on the bed. As he moved, he noticed the sheets beneath him were damp with dried sweat, leaving behind a mess that hinted at just how much he had perspired. The room was cold, which made it clear that even in this controlled environment, his body had reacted to the experience in the land of origin. "A dimension away, and yet my body here felt it too. The feeling of death," he murmured, a wary smile tugging at his lips. He stood still for a moment, collecting himself, before walking over to the table to grab his phone. 12:23 p.m. Due to advancing to rank 1, this recent visit was the longest he had ever spent in the land of origin. And with civilization now within reach there, Michael realized his time in the real world might soon begin to dwindle. Of course, if the land of origin couldn't provide the experience points he needed, he would have to shift his focus back to the real world, no matter how much the other dimension tempted him. At the very least, if he gained stable access to dimensional cracks, he might still make it in time for the academy exams. He recalled reading on the forums that Awakener academies typically held their entrance exams around the same time as cultivation academies, though the venues were different. It was said that, A week after the awakening ceremony, Awakeners and third-year students would be summoned and informed about the supernatural academies. It was Sunday now, which meant Michael should expect the summon from his school soon. Subconsciously, he realized 4 days had already passed since his awakening. Dropping his phone, Michael moved to get dressed for the day. Aside from checking the value of the materials he had brought back from the ruins, he also needed to buy clothes for his humanoid, Undead, to cover their nakedness. However, his first priority was the Supers Association. It didn't take Michael long to get ready. Much to his satisfaction, he hadn't destroyed anything in the hotel, a clear sign that his control over his body was back. However, he couldn't ignore the subtle behavior of the people around him. They seemed reluctant to stand close to him for long. At first, he dismissed it as coincidence, but the pattern became more apparent as he made his way through the city. When he checked himself in the hotel bathroom mirror earlier, he hadn't noticed anything unusual, aside from his physique looking slightly more muscular and defined. It wasn't until he arrived at the Supers Association and stood in front of Grace, his usual receptionist, that he finally understood what was going on. "I need to suppress my aura," Michael repeated the words Grace had said the moment she saw him. Though confused, he could roughly understand what she meant by aura. It was probably his power leaking out unconsciously. But the real question was how. How was he supposed to suppress something he couldn't even see? "It seems you've just advanced," Grace began, her voice calm yet carrying a subtle undertone of curiosity. "Your mana is quite impressive," she added. What Grace didn't mention, however, was just how impressive. Michael's mana was strong enough that she, a mid-stage rank 3 cultivator, had to take him extremely seriously. The mana she could sense radiating from Michael was just that impressive. While she had encountered newly advanced rank 1 Awakeners with immense mana levels before, Michael's rapid progression was notable. Reaching rank 1 just 4 days after awakening was rare, even for the most gifted. "My mana," Michael muttered, confused. "Is it my mana I have to suppress?" "Yes," Grace confirmed before elaborating. "Your mana seems to have increased by a very significant amount. Though you think you have it under control, to supernaturals like us, it's almost like you're announcing your presence. Your control is still impressive, though. Ordinary people mostly feel uncomfortable around you rather than outright fainting." Michael nodded, slowly piecing things together. He remembered reading that at a certain point, mana could start influencing the surroundings even without any intentional effort from the caster. Of course, he wasn't anywhere near that level yet. Right now, his mana was simply leaking slightly, enough to make ordinary humans uncomfortable due to their lack of exposure to such a high concentration. Knowing the root of the problem made things a bit clearer for Michael, but as a novice in magic, actually fixing the issue was easier said than done. Still, it was a relief to know his condition wasn't considered a major issue within the Supers Association. He could take his time to work on it. Soon, Michael shifted focus to the reason for his visit. "Were you able to secure any entries into cracks for me, Miss Grace?" he asked. "Name, Michael Normans. Class, Adept Necromancer. Level 15. Exp 1094, 17718. Strength 30.4. Agility 41.1. Continue your adventure at Empire. Constitution 31.7. Intelligence 110.1. Attribute points 30. Skills: Undead Summoning, Undead Revival, Detect, Basic Shot, Share Senses, Spearmanship, Acid Shot, Bone Spear, Slow Curse, Bone Armor, Corpse Explosion. Talent: Infinite Evolution. Class Skill: Contract Slot 2040. Gift: Mark of Origin. Venom Thorn Ravager, LV 25 max. Name: Lucky. exp 805,990/1,021,752. Rank Extraordinary. Skills Bite Plant Control, Advanced Mastery, Poison Advanced Mastery, Viral Growth Basic Mastery, Toxic Resurgence Basic Mastery. Master Michael Norman. Undead Redthorn LV, 25 Max. Name Prince. exp 238,677/1,021,752. Rank Rare. Skills Bite Plant Control, Intermediate Mastery, Poison Basic Mastery. Master Michael Norman. Chapter 96, Potential Profit. The day before, Michael had requested Grace to apply for entries into the dimensional cracks in Woodstone City. This time, his requirement was straightforward. He wanted to enter the cracks solo. The association had no restrictions against supernaturals applying to cracks within their membership access, regardless of the applicant's registered strength. The only stipulation was that an individual could not apply for multiple entries into the same crack in one day to avoid causing complications that could increase the difficulty for the next cleanup team. However, special cracks, such as those inhabited by other civilizations, came with stricter requirements and regulations. Your journey continues at Empire. Michael had no business with such specialized cracks at the moment. Corrupted-type cracks still held more value to him than anything else. I did manage to secure you access to a few entries, Grace said, her fingers moving swiftly over her keyboard. However, since you requested solo applications, which is basically the same as an entire team applying, the entries are rather spaced out. Michael nodded at her explanation. As for the spaced-out entries, he didn't mind as long as he had them. What days are they? He asked. Give me a moment, Grace replied, her focus on her system. Michael assumed she was pulling up his file, and sure enough, it didn't take long for her to respond. Your application was approved for all three-dimensional cracks in Woodstone City, the Level 1 Goblin World crack, the Level 1 Forest Domain crack, and the Level 2 Ape Region crack, Grace explained before pausing for a moment. A second later, she continued, Unfortunately, you don't have any entries today. Your first one is tomorrow at noon in the Forest Domain crack. After that, you have 6 more entries spaced out over the next 2 weeks. An email with the full schedule will be sent to you after we confirm your intention to proceed with these cracks. Michael wanted to ask why the duration was limited to 2 weeks, but held himself back, forming his own conclusions. It's probably to prevent monopolies. If anyone could just reserve cracks indefinitely, there'd be plenty of ways to exploit the system. Given how quickly cracks regenerated, Michael doubted there was a shortage of entries. A Level 1 crack could be cleared at least 3 times daily. Over 2 weeks, that amounted to 42 entries per crack. Considering Woodstone City had 2 Level 1 cracks, that was nearly 100 available slots over the same period. However, Michael wasn't the only supernatural in the city, so it made sense that access wouldn't be unlimited. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that 7 entries in 2 weeks was quite generous. If he cleared only Level 1 cracks, he was looking at a guaranteed $700,000. For the current Michael, that was still a significant amount. Factoring in if he had access to the Level 2 Ape Region crack, he estimated he could make over $2 million in the next 2 weeks. This estimation was confirmed after Michael and Grace finalized a few details back and forth. Are we okay with this, Mr. Norman? Grace asked for confirmation. Yes, Michael replied with a smile. He wasn't sure if he was just lucky or if Grace had gone out of her way to help, but among the 7 entries he secured, 2 were for the Level 2 Ape Region dimensional crack. Based on his previous experience in that crack, earning at least $1 million per entry was practically guaranteed. 2 entries meant $2 million at the very least, and when combined with the profits from the other 5 level 1 cracks, Michael was looking at a potential income of $3 million or more. This was a substantial amount and would allow him to do a lot of things. For one, he could finally afford proper clothing for his undead, no more nakedness, and even equip them with high-quality gear. He could also get himself better equipment while still having plenty left over for other needs. Maybe I can check the trade center for something that guarantees evolution points, regardless of star rating, Michael mused as he left Grace's counter. If I can find something like that and buy in bulk, it'd save me a lot of trouble. It'd be even better if it's available in the forum store. It'd make things so much more convenient. Lost in thought, Michael began daydreaming about his plans as he headed toward the trade center. Now that his entries into dimensional cracks were settled, it was time to address his other business for the day. Selling off the materials he looted from the gargles. Compared to the guaranteed profits from the cracks, Michael was even more excited about this venture. Something told him he was about to make a major profit. If the materials could earn him at least as much as his future dimensional crack entries, Michael would have more flexibility in how he spent his money. This was especially true since his undead numbers would increase after using the corpses he'd obtained from the cracks. As these thoughts ran through his mind, Michael arrived at the trade center. However, instead of encountering Brian, the familiar face he expected, he saw the same middle-aged substitute from before. Though slightly surprised, Michael wasn't particularly bothered about conducting business with this man. Since he wasn't purchasing something like source liquid, where the star rating determined whether he'd earn evolution points, there was little difference in dealing with the substitute or Brian. Of course, a familiar face was always more reassuring. "Good afternoon," Michael greeted as he approached the counter, initiating the conversation. "Good afternoon, what can I do for you today?" The cheerful stand-in for Brian responded with a friendly smile. "I'd like to sell something," Michael got straight to the point. "What are you selling?" "Some materials." "Materials? What kind of materials?" Michael paused for a moment, recalling the names of the materials he had looted from the gargles. He began listing them one by one, but as he continued, he noticed something odd. The more he spoke, the deeper the look of confusion grew on the middle-aged man's face. Chapter 97, Miss Priscilla. "Is something the matter?" Michael couldn't help but ask as he finished listing the names of the materials he had. The middle-aged man behind the counter chuckled awkwardly. "No, nothing's wrong, it's just, I don't recognize any of the names you just mentioned." Michael's face fell, and a flicker of anxiety surged through him. "Does this mean I won't be able to sell these materials here?" he thought nervously. He wasn't worried about their value. How could materials used to construct monsters capable of going head-to-head with extraordinary ranked creatures be worthless? That was impossible. But the thought of not being able to sell them in this city was troubling. It makes sense, though, Michael reasoned. The Super Association branch here wasn't exactly a hub of resources. From his daily browsing on the forums, though he hadn't had time to check his phone today, Michael knew Woodstone City was relatively backward compared to other cities, even in the supernatural realm. Its resources and infrastructure lagged behind. This was reflected in the city's lack of dimensional cracks, only 3, all low-leveled. It didn't compare to cities with larger populations or more valuable cracks, even if those cracks were fewer in number. Your next chapter awaits on Empire. After all, 2 level 2 corrupted-type cracks could easily outweigh 5 level 1 corrupted-type cracks in terms of resource potential. Will I have to travel to another city to sell these materials? Michael's thoughts began to spiral. But before his concerns could grow further, the middle-aged man spoke again, and his next words brought a wave of relief. Though I don't recognize the materials you mentioned, it doesn't mean we don't have someone here who will. So don't worry about not being able to sell anything, the middle-aged man reassured him with a smile. Michael muttered, "Oh," feeling a little embarrassed. He realized he had likely worn his thoughts on his face. The man continued speaking, his tone light and professional. "Based on what you said, I assume these materials are quite a lot and probably unique, right?" Michael nodded in confirmation. "All right then, please follow me through this door," the man said, pointing to an entrance Michael had taken several times to meet with Brian. He had also taken this path with the middle-aged man before too, when he brought monster corpses the last time. However, from the man's tone, it didn't feel like he was giving directions to a stranger or newcomer, but rather following procedure out of habit. Michael didn't think too deeply about it and followed the middle-aged man. They walked through a familiar corridor lined with doors until they reached a location Michael was familiar with. It was the underground storage space where he had made his first $100,000 from dimensional monster materials. "Please wait here for a while," the man instructed. "I'll bring someone who can likely identify what you want to sell. In the meantime, you can use this time to bring out the materials." This wasn't their first trade, so the middle-aged man knew Michael's status as an awakener and his storage space. After saying what he has to say, with that, the man left. Since Michael was already familiar with the space, he felt no discomfort staying there alone. After a quick glance around the wide area, he began pulling out the remains of the gargoyles one by one, carefully arranging them according to their material type. As he worked, Michael also made sure to keep his mana from leaking, just as he'd been doing since leaving Grace's counter. Unfortunately, the middle-aged man earlier hadn't shown any reaction regarding his aura, so Michael still wasn't sure if he was doing it correctly. While arranging the gargoyle remains, he used detect on them again to confirm their information. Obsidian Forge Alu. A blend of dark metals and obsidian-like minerals, offering a stone-like texture combined with flexibility and high durability. Commonly used for constructing durable constructs or golems. Veined Shard. A lightweight yet durable fragment with blue-green veins, often used to craft mana-conductive tools. Feather Plate. Flexible, metallic plates as light as feathers, ideal for creating aerodynamic constructs. Cora Stone. Dense, black material, prized for its ability to store and stabilize mana. Crystal Sphere. A smooth, patterned stone utilized in crafting energy detectors and amplifiers. Ether Stone. A pale, translucent stone with anti-gravitational properties, frequently used in levitation devices. Runed Core. An irregular core marked by glowing runes, functioning as a power source for advanced machinery. They should be worth a lot, right? Michael thought, feeling a mix of anxiety and anticipation. A few minutes later, the middle-aged man returned, this time accompanied by a middle-aged woman wearing glasses and dressed in blue robes. Robes weren't a popular style, even in this world, making her stand out even more. And then there were the glasses. Can supernaturals have bad eyesight? Michael thought, finding it slightly ironic. He didn't have much time to dwell on the idea, though, as the woman suddenly appeared in front of him, or rather, in front of the materials he had laid out. "Is this Obsidian Forge alloy?" a soft voice echoed. The woman spoke calmly, but with undeniable authority. Yes," Michael stammered, caught off guard by her sudden question and presence. He answered absent-mindedly, still processing her unexpected movements. However, it didn't seem like she was paying attention to him, though. Instead, her focus remained entirely on the scattered materials in front of her as she began to speak. "This is quite a rare material, and it was created exceptionally well. However, it doesn't seem to have been made using the Federation method, yet it retains, if not surpasses, the same level of quality. It's uniquely crafted. Michael was stunned by her observations. How much can she infer in such a short time? He wondered, impressed though he understood only a part of what she said. Noticing his confusion, the middle-aged man who had gotten closer leaned in slightly and whispered, "Miss Priscilla is a magic crafter and an exceptionally knowledgeable expert in magic in general." Though Michael had already suspected that the woman was a cultivator, her quick recognition of the materials almost made him think she might be an awakener for a moment. Her insight seemed uncanny. The man's explanation prompted another thought. Michael glanced at her again, this time more curious. "She's a mage." Chapter 98, Big Prices. Among the two cultivation systems in Aurora, Michael was far more familiar with the Knight system than the Mage system. In fact, this was the case for most locals, to the extent that the term cultivator almost felt exclusively associated with Knights. This might be due to the fact that the majority of people practiced the Knight cultivation system. According to Michael's knowledge, a mage was someone who possessed the talent to be an excellent knight, a prodigy even. In a way, one could say every apprentice mage had the potential to be an exceptional knight. However, this was a threshold few could ever hope to reach. The original Michael, for example, would have been lucky to successfully light up a life seed before his death, a level of talent that wasn't particularly rare in the general population. Only individuals like Brian had the exceptional ability to become mages, which was ironic considering he somehow awakened the two most popular professions in Aurora. This highlighted how rare mages truly were. The rarity extended into the awakening system as well. The Knight class was common grade, while any mage-related class was considered at least rare. Awakeners could also cultivate, and it wasn't that Michael didn't want to try his hand at cultivation now that he was an awakener. It was just that he lacked the time for such slow and steady progress. Miss Priscilla was the first mage Michael had ever seen, and he was understandably curious about her. However, his curiosity was fleeting. Her significance to him didn't come close to the value of the money his materials could fetch. She had said they were valuable, and that alone made Michael all the more expectant. Michael watched as Priscilla examined the rest of the materials, correctly identifying each one. He was both impressed and anxious, waiting patiently as she worked. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she turned her attention to him. "These materials of yours are quite valuable, but due to how you handled them, their price will have to be adjusted downwards slightly," Priscilla explained. Michael listened in silence, understanding her reasoning. There was little he could do about the state of the materials. Killing the gargoyles cleanly wasn't an option. Unlike the goblins or black apes, overpowering them outright had been impossible. The wingless gargoyle was okay, but when he fought the other two, preserving their bodies had been the last thing on his mind. Priscilla, too, seemed to understand this. She knew that perfectly preserving monster corpses was a skill for the powerful, and the quality of these materials indicated the young man in front of her was no pushover. The remnants of the gargoyles alone, combined with the quality of the materials and faint traces of technology, suggested that the creatures had been formidable golems. All of this left her with a high impression of Michael, despite knowing he was an awakener, information she had gleaned from the middle-aged man beside her. What she didn't realize, however, was just how extraordinary Michael truly was. He wasn't an old awakener like she subconsciously assumed, but a mere 4-day-old necromancer with the equivalent power of an early-stage rank 4 cultivator. After addressing the state of the materials, Priscilla got straight to business. "I'll start by stating the price I'm offering for your materials. First off, let's start with the lowest, which are the Etherstone and the Runed Core," she said. Michael's ears perked up at that, and he began listening attentively. She said the lowest first. From those prices, Michael could gauge how big the sale would be by the end. The runed core is partially damaged and will most likely be used as a research item that gets repurposed. As for the ether stone, though rare, there are alternatives that serve the same function, even if they're not as durable. For the runed core, I'll offer you $450,000. Had it been in better condition, it could have fetched around $600,000. As for the ether stone, I'll offer $700,000 each. Since there are two, that totals $1.4 million. Together, everything comes to $1,850,000. Do you have any objections? Stay connected with Empire. Priscilla's calm tone made it clear she was prepared for Michael to raise concerns about the price. Was he going to? No. With a neutral expression, Michael responded, "No, no problem." Though his tone was calm, his insides were anything but. Almost 2 million, almost 2 million, almost 2 million. Michael wanted to scream but managed to hold it in, keeping a poker face. Although he had anticipated that the gargle remains would be valuable, Michael was still surprised, thrilled, even, and his excitement grew as he thought about the next items. The next material Priscilla moved on to was the vein shards, which resembled short wires about the thickness of a baby's finger. As she counted the shards, Michael did the same. In the end, they counted 33 pieces. Priscilla spoke again, her tone steady and professional. Once again, we're dealing with technology different from ours. However, these shards can be repurposed easily without much processing, while also serving as valuable research items. The way she spoke gave Michael the impression that she was an honest woman, which made him trust her just a little more. It definitely wasn't because she was throwing out big numbers. For the shards, I'll offer $65,000 each. What do you think? Michael wasn't thinking, at least not about negotiating. No, he was thinking about $65,000 times 33. The current Michael had no choice but to be a trusting customer. A small part of him regretted not checking the forums to get an estimate of the prices, but even now, the urge to grab his phone and look things up didn't surface. For some reason, his brush with death had made him want to be more in tune with life, at least for a little while. That, and he didn't believe an association staff member would scam him too heavily. At most, they might take slight advantage of him. Of course, if they did, Michael could only chalk it up to experience. However, he promised himself that after this, he would always come prepared, just like Myra had when she sold the black ape corpses, ensuring she wasn't taken advantage of by the old female supervisor. Chapter 85 delivers the long-awaited confrontation as Michael faces the level 20 gargle. But just as Prince engages, two massive winged gargles at level 25 emerge from a mysterious black tower, forcing Michael to summon Lucky and triggering an all-out war between his undead and these stone monstrosities. Chapters 86 through 88 showcase the brutal three-way battle as Lucky's advanced mastery, plant control, creates a vine dome to trap the flying gargles, neutralizing their aerial advantage, while Prince finishes off the original target, resulting in Michael gaining nearly 1,100 XP and pushing Lucky to within 200,000 XP of rank 2, all while discovering through loot that these gargles are actually golems made from materials like obsidian forge alley. Vein shards and runed cores worth a fortune. Chapters 89 through 91 shift to exploration as Michael enters the Black Tower, finding it's a gargle production factory with blueprints and half-assembled bodies, and he has a sudden realization about evolving normal animals like eagles. But just as excitement builds, Chapter 92 delivers the most terrifying moment in the entire series. A corrupted extraordinary entity awakens, targets Michael with mental attacks that nearly kill him, and the system flashes blood-red warnings about real death for the first time, forcing Michael to flee for his life, while Lucky and Prince sacrifice themselves to buy time. Chapters 93 through 95 cover Michael's escape and aftermath as he summons his grievously wounded undead back, Lucky blinded in one eye, Prince missing its tail, and realizes he's unleashed something terrible, while also discovering civilization in the land of origin for the first time. A massive wall with people passing through its gates. Chapters 96 through 98 bring Michael back to the real world, where he learns from Grace that his uncontrolled mana is making ordinary people uncomfortable, secures 7 solo crack entries worth over $3 million potential profit, and heads to the trade center to sell his gargle materials, only to meet Miss Priscilla, a mage and magic crafter who identifies everything instantly and offers him prices that make his head spin. $450,000 for the damaged runed core, $1.4 million for 2 ether stones, and $65,000 each for 33 vein shards, totaling over $2 million before she's even finished listing the rest. With Lucky and Prince recovering, 30 attribute points banked, a corrupted monster lurking in the ruins, and millions of dollars worth of materials waiting to be sold, Michael stands at a crossroads: return to the land of origin stronger than ever, or focus on the real world and those precious solo cracks. The choice will define his future, and with that thing still waiting in the tower, every moment counts. That's it for today's Extreme Highlights breakdown. Smash that like button, subscribe to Extreme Highlights audio novels, hit the notification bell, drop your novel requests in the comments, and remember, in a world where one near-death experience teaches you more than a month of training, being cautious has never been so profitable. Stay extreme, stay tuned, and keep leveling up.